Hey, everybody.
Good morning or good afternoon, 11:59. It's still morning.
YouTube is live.
All right, thanks, Leo. So we're live, Pam, if you want to just go ahead and get us started since it's noon.
Absolutely. So good afternoon and happy holidays, everyone. I'm Pam Sebeski. I'm the chair of the Transportation Planning Board, and I call the TPB's December 21st, 2022 meeting to order. This is an all virtual meeting, and I trust the audio and video connections are working well for all of you. As always, please call, email, or text if you are experiencing any technical difficulties. If you text to the staff, they'll get help you out. You should have the contact information in the email we received from Conti last week. We continue to live stream the audio and video of this meeting on TPB's YouTube channel. Sounds like someone has a mic open. Even though we as members are familiar, for the benefit of those watching, I will briefly review the process for the virtual meeting. To start the meeting, I will ask staff to take a roll call of members or alternates to document their presence at the meeting and determine that we have a quorum. After staff's roll call, I will ask staff to summarize comments we received online. A copy of comments received is available to us on the meeting webpage. As we get to the main agenda for the action items on the agenda, I will have the presenter complete their briefing, then invite a motion to approve any resolution we plan to adopt and seek a second for the motion made. After that, I will invite questions or comments in turn by jurisdiction before calling for a vote. For the votes, I will seek just the nays and abstentions and take the rest as yes votes. I will call for the votes in turn by jurisdiction. For the informational items, I will have the presenters complete their briefing and then invite questions or comments in turn by jurisdictions. Lastly, a friendly reminder to mute your microphones always, and importantly, to unmute your mic and state your name and jurisdiction when you do speak. Before I call on Lynn, I'd like to take the chairman's privilege and ask for a change in the agenda. And what that I'm asking for is that our information item is the people presenting do have some time constraints. So I'm going to move them ahead of the chairman's remarks in our agenda. So that one change has been made to our agenda for today, and I'd like everyone to make a note of that. With that, Lynn, I will call on you for the roll call.
Great, thanks. And that's just heads up. So Beth, Karen, and Jeff, you guys are definitely going to have your time early. All right, so we're going to go through our roll call, and I'm going to start by listing the jurisdiction or agency. And if you could state your name, we will capture you. I will also be monitoring the participant list. So let's start with the District of Columbia District Council. Brooke Pinto.
Ella Hansen here for Councilmember Pinto.
Thanks, Ella. District Council Charles Allen.
I'm here.
Thanks. District Council Christina Henderson.
She will be here shortly. This is
Okay.
Heather in her office.
Okay, great. Thanks, Heather. District Department of Transportation.
Hi, Stephen Varga here on behalf of Everett Lott.
Okay, Stephen, thank you. District Office of Planning.
Rebecca Schwartzman here, and I know Dan is on his way.
Okay, great. Thank you. Moving on to Maryland, the City of Bowie.
Maddie Bizerto here.
Thank you. Charles County.
Glenn Collins present.
Thank you. College Park.
Patrick Wayne here, Mayor.
Thanks. Frederick County.
Mark Mishler here for County Executive Fitzwater.
Thank you. City of Frederick.
Kelly Russell, present.
Thanks, Kelly. City of Gaithersburg.
Dennis Sunslinger for the City of Gaithersburg.
Thanks, Dennis. City of Greenbelt.
Emmett Jordan here, City of Greenbelt.
Thanks, Emmett. City of Laurel. Montgomery County.
Hi, Marilyn Balcom.
Thanks, Marilyn. And Glenn Orland is here too. I saw him. Montgomery County Executive.
Hi, Chris Conklin here.
Thanks, Chris. Gary is on vacation, which is lovely. Prince George's County.
Vic Weisberg.
Thanks, Vic. Prince George's County Executive, or sorry, County Council. Mel or Denny? Okay, they're not here. City of Rockville.
Bridget Donald Newton is here.
Bridget. Tacoma Park. Maryland Department of Transportation.
Earl is here.
Thanks, Earl. Maryland House of Delegates.
Mark Corman.
Thanks, Mark. Maryland Senate. Moving on to Virginia, City of Alexandria. Arlington County. City of Fairfax.
David Meyer here.
Thanks, David. Fairfax County.
Walter Alcorn here.
Thank you.
And James Walkinshaw here.
Thank you. Falls Church.
Dave Snyder for the City of Falls Church.
Thanks. Fauquier County. Loudoun County.
Corinne Sigsbury.
Thanks, Corinna. Anyone else? Okay, City of Manassas.
Pam Sebeski here.
Thanks. City of Manassas Park. Jeanette. Okay. Prince William County.
Ann Wheeler here.
Vic Angry here.
Vic. Virginia Department of Transportation.
John Lynch, present.
Great, thanks. Virginia House of Delegates. Virginia Senate. WMATA.
Allison Davis from WMATA.
Allison. Our ex officio vote folks, Federal Highway Administration. Federal Transit Administration. National Capital Planning Commission. Got a couple of here. Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority. And National Park Service. Okay, great. That completes our roll call. We do have a quorum.
Great. Thank you, Lynn. And now we'll go on to any comments received electronically. Would you please summarize them for us?
Yes, sure. We received one comment between the November 2022 TPB meeting and noon on Tuesday, December 20th. A memo with a summary of that comment, as well as the entire comment, can be found on our meeting page. Arlene Montemorano submitted an email which forwards a 2014 article on urban traffic congestion. So as I mentioned, our comment can be found on the meeting page. That concludes the public comment report. Thank you.
Great, moving right along. Next, we will start with a review and approval of the minutes of our November 16th, 2022 meeting. We have a copy of this in our packet. I invite a motion to adopt the minutes as provided. Please state your name and jurisdiction as you make the motion.
Kelly Russell, City of Frederick, move for approval.
Thank you, Kelly. Is there a second?
Vic Angry, Prince William County, second.
Thank you, Vic. Are there any corrections or additions to the meeting minutes? I'll start with the members from the District of Columbia, Maryland, Virginia, other agencies. All right, for the votes then, any nays or abstentions from the District of Columbia, Maryland, Virginia?
I abstain, Emmett Jordan from Greenbelt.
Thank you. All right, anyone else from Maryland? Virginia? Other agencies? Okay, looks like that's approved. And we will move on. Now to the technical committee report. We have a written summary of the December 2nd meeting. I would like to recognize Matt Arcieri, the chair of the technical committee. Matt, is there anything that you would like to highlight or expand on from your meeting?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You have my written comments, obviously the items that you're going to see on your agenda today, but we did meet on December 2nd. So the other items we talked about were an update on public participation evaluation, receive an update on climate goal updates, and a really interesting update on the 12-year bottleneck analysis. So that is my report. And I just wanted to say real quick, since this is my last time, I just wanted to thank TPB for the opportunity to serve the region in a little different role, and especially acknowledge the TPB staff and Lynn, who actually does everything for me. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to serve the region.
Thank you, Matt. Are there any questions for Matt from the District of Columbia, Maryland, Virginia, or other agencies? Okay, I will like to say that, as you heard, Matt will be concluding his chairmanship as of our technical committee at the end of this month, and I would like to thank you very much for accepting this additional responsibility for this year and doing such a great job. The board has a certificate to present to you. I understand this was mailed to you, and serving as an elected in this jurisdiction, I know you have much going on, and taking this on was a lot, but much appreciated, and I really appreciated your service this year. So the certificate reads as follows: the National Capital Region Transportation Planning Board at the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments hereby presents this recognition of gratitude and esteem to Matt Arcieri for his distinguished service to the TPB and people of the region as TPB's Technical Committee Chair 2022 and TPB Steering Committee Member 2022. Thank you again, Matt, for your service, and we can give him a virtual round of applause. Okay, so we're going to move on. I will start with the Community Advisory Committee report. We have a written summary of the December 15th meeting, and I will recognize Ashley Hudson, Chair of the CAC. Ashley, is there anything that you would like to highlight or expand on?
Yes, and thank you, Vice Mayor Sebeski. Similar to what Matt shared, we also received a regional climate goals update. Robert Christopher of COG's Department of Environmental Programs shared that the region surpassed the 20% reduction goal set for 2020 by 4% for a total of 24% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions between 2005 and 2020. CAC members shared concern that 2020 data is not indicative of permanent change. But TPB staff person Aaron Morrow added that 2020 data is included as a milestone year and that the data will be useful for understanding abnormality of pandemic years. We also received a presentation on public participation evaluation from January 19th through September 2022, which of course our group was very interested in. Among the comments, CAC members recommended that the CAC chair should seek guidance directly from the TPB chair on issues in which our input will be most useful. Overall, there was strong desire expressed for increased conversations between the CAC and TPB, meaning CAC members should build relationships with their TPB representatives, as we've been saying throughout the year, and also that CAC members should watch the TPB meetings for better understanding of where their input can best be used. There was also suggestions for the CAC chair to put out public statements through social media and or use visual aids during the presentation to the TPB. Our group was very excited to hear that there were 77 applications for the CAC's next term. And there was also interest among our group to meet in person for our last meeting of the term, which will be January 12th. So I will be joining you all again next month. So thank you. And this concludes my summary, and I will happily take any questions.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Are there any questions for Ashley from the District of Columbia? Maryland? Virginia? WMATA or other agencies? Okay, I just would like to say quickly, thank you, Ashley, for serving as the chair this last year at CAC. I know you have one more month that you'll be doing it, but I won't be in the chair role, obviously, next month. And also living in my jurisdiction and having great knowledge of transportation, your service has been very valuable on the CAC and to us on the TPB. I really have enjoyed the opportunity to get to know the CAC members better, and under your leadership, that was an initiative that was brought forward, and I hope that will continue to go forward in the future with more interaction with the TPB. So thank you for your leadership, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say next month.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. The next person I need to recognize is our colleague, Kanika Gary from the City of Alexandria. Lynn, is he with us?
Yes.
Okay, great. Great. Who has chaired the Access for All Advisory Committee. We have a copy of the report. Kanik, anything you would like to highlight for us?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. just a couple of things. We met on December 16th. We also went through the public participation evaluation with Ms. Rachel Bayerly from the TPB Communications Manager and the folks from Foursquare. Presentation basically included the findings. I think that there was a variety of comments, from TPB's been doing a lot to reach out to a lot of different communities, trying to meet people where they are, but also the recognizing the difficulty it is to reach out to these communities sometimes and to make sure that we're continuing that effort and trying to expand it as much as possible wherever we can. And then the other item that we looked at, of course, was the Better Bus listening session from WMATA. We had Miss Allison Davis as well as Peter Caifredo. Again, I think, there was a commending of the staff for the amount of outreach that they've been doing around this and recognizing all the different aspects that comes to riding the bus. It's not just getting on the bus. It's where do you find the bus? How far is the bus? Is there enough lighting at the bus? Is there a bus shelter? Is there a safe crosswalk? So taking all of these things into account for a full encompassing ride on an experience on WMATA bus. So I thought it was really well put together, and our members definitely shared some ideas and some thoughts about everything to continue doing the type of outreach that WMATA is doing and to expand upon it, similar to the item before. And then the last couple of items, personally, I just want to say thank you to the Access for All Committee for having me. It's been an honor and a pleasure to be able to serve for the last 2 years. Personally, I'd like to thank Lynn Wenchel-Mendy, as well as Lynn Erickson and Sergio Ritaco for all their support. We have really, really great staff here at TPB and, couldn't do it without them. And Sergio introduced a new staff member that we're going to have. And yeah, just thanks for everything.
Oh, well, thank you, Kenneth. He has chaired this committee, like he said, for the last 2 years and led the previous round of enhanced mobility funding allocation. The board thanks you for your service and taking this responsibility on top of everything else you have. The board has a certificate for you, and I understand this has been mailed to you. I will read what the certificate says. The National Capital Region Transportation Planning Board at the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments hereby presents this recognition of gratitude and esteem to Kenneth Gary for his distinguished service to the TPB and people of the region as Access for All Advisory Committee Chair 2021-2022. Kenneth, I really do appreciate all that you've done. This is a really important committee. And is there anything you would like to share with us about the Access for All Committee and how we as a board can help improve services to traditionally the underserved people?
I think first and foremost, it's a really great group, a lot of insight, and really just paying attention to what they have to say, right? Because it can be some very small things that are easy fixes, easy investments, and make a huge difference for all people, frankly. So really, really great group to work with, and just thank you again.
Oh, thank you, Kenneth. While we're discussing our Access for All Advisory Committee, I am pleased to announce that Christina Henderson from the District of Columbia has agreed to serve as the chair for the next year for this committee. Thank you, Christina. I know that you will be an equally great chair and lead the committee in its work activities next year, which includes, as I understand it, developing recommendations to award about $10 million in federal funds to improve transportation services to older adults and people with disabilities. So such meaningful work and such appreciated. So thank you again, Kenneth. It's been my pleasure to serve with you this year. So thank you, everyone. Okay, we're going to move on to the steering committee. Now to report from the steering committee, we have a written summary of the December 2nd steering committee meeting and the director's report on other items of interest. Our director, Conti, is unable to participate in today's meeting, so we will have our update from Lynn Erickson, the TPB's Plan Development and Coordination Program Director. Lynn, take it away.
Yeah, thanks. I do want to say Conti extends the warmest holiday greetings to everyone. He just couldn't be here at this time today, so I'm stepping in or stepping down to fill his shoes. So thank you for your patience with me. All right, so you all have a copy of our written report, so I'm not going to review all of it, but the brief overview is that our steering committee met on December 2nd, and we approved 2 amendments to the 2023 to 2026 TIP. First was at the request of the Maryland Department of Transportation. It added additional funding, about $45 million, for 2 projects that are already in the plan and TIP, and added a new project with about $11 million in funding for the safety and accessibility improvements along Maryland 6 in La Plata. Details are on pages 4 to 22. The second and last amendment to the TIP that the committee approved was requested by VDOT to add a new planning and engineering study to explore the continuation of the express lanes on Virginia's Beltway east of I-395. Details are on pages 23 to 27. Under the letter sent and received section, the TPB issued a letter in support of Prince William County's application for federal RAISE grant money to improve the Prince William Parkway and Minnievale Road intersection. They're building an interchange. A copy of that letter is on page 29. Under the announcements and updates section, on page 31 is a draft of our TPB meeting schedule for next year, including the proposed all virtual and then the in-person hybrid meetings consistent with our updated TPB bylaws. So there's actually a draft stamp on it right now because our newly elected chair needs to weigh in on those when those virtual meetings are. So once they are elected later this meeting, we'll have it finalized, and then in January, and I don't anticipate a lot of changes, but and we'll remind you every month whether the meeting is all virtual or in person. But again, we get 3 a year, so take a look at what we've proposed there. So also we have a reminder in there that the solicitation of our applications for TPB's annual Transportation and Land Use Connection Program funding grants opens on January 6th. We're also opening our solicitation for our Regional Roadway Safety Program technical assistance grants, also open at the same time. That way you have 2 grants at the same time. That way we're trying to minimize confusion on when our application periods are open. And this time, actually, the limit of funding will be increased from $60,000 to $80,000. There's more info on pages 32 and 33 of your packet for that. Lastly, the fall wave of the Regional Street Smart Pedestrian and Bicyclist Safety Campaign took place from November 7th to December 4th, featuring a press event on November 17th at the Eagle Academy School in Southeast Washington. We want to thank Mayor Muriel Bowser and other speakers who joined us that day, including DDOT Director Everett Lott, Metropolitan Police Assistant Chief Jeffrey Carroll, Virginia DMV Highway Safety Office Director John Saunders, MDOT MVA Administrator Christy Nizer, COG Executive Director Chuck Bean, crash survivor Helen Harris, and an Eagle Academy student named Aiden Wilkes. Overall, this fall's Street Smart campaign included television and transit advertisements, enforcement activations, and placement of an interactive testimonial wall at shopping malls and other gathering places. For more information, visit bstreetsmart.net. Street Smart is one of many roadway safety activities pursued by TPB and member agencies. Other activities were among the topics discussed at TPB's special work session, the Safety Roundtable with the State Departments of Transportation, immediately prior to last month's November 16th TPB meeting. So you received a brief recap of that work session at the November 16th meeting itself, but in your packet, we're following up with a more detailed summary memo of the work session. Also, the meeting recording and presentations are posted on our TPB website, which you can find through a link at the end of the summary memo in your packet. So through the calendar of the COG TPB events at MWCARG, we can forward that web link to you if you can't find it. But thanks again to board members and state DOT representatives who were able to participate in both the work session discussion and the meeting on this critical issue. So that concludes my report. Thank you, Chair Skabeski. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. So let's see if anyone has any questions for Lynn. We'll start with the District of Columbia, Maryland, Virginia, WMATA, or other agencies. All right. Thank you, Lynn. Great update. Great summarization. It's been a busy year. Lots been going on. So as I started in the beginning with my comments, we're going to bypass the chairman's remarks for the moment to allow the presentation to occur in a timely manner that we need. So we're going to move on to item number 7. And we will hear from Elizabeth Miller and Karen Sharehold from the National Capital Planning Commission about a new vision for Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest between the White House and the 3 alternative concepts it has developed. This is our opportunity to provide our input to this commission. Thank you all so much for being here today. And Elizabeth, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Miller, the Director of Physical Planning with the National Capital Planning Commission. And I'm here today with my team, Karen Sharehold and Jeff Jamalot. We appreciate your time on your agenda and accommodating our schedule very much. We're really excited to share a new proposed vision for Pennsylvania Avenue. So in July, NCPC wrapped up a 4-month public outreach period that included briefings with the Transportation Planning Board's Technical Committee and the Access for All Advisory Committee, WMATA, and among others. Today, Karen and I are going to take about 10 minutes to overview the initiative, introduce the vision and the concepts, and some of the feedback we got back from the public, as well as, and then I'm going to wrap up with next steps. So the Avenue's been really cycling through renewal and decline for almost 200 years. The current guiding plan for the Avenue is about 50 years old and well past due for an update. The agencies that you see here at the bottom of the screen kicked off the Pennsylvania Avenue Initiative to envision a new future for the Avenue, which has become even more important as the district and the region work to recover from the economic impacts of the pandemic. Our area of focus is this 1.2-mile corridor, this area shown in orange, between the White House and the U.S. Capitol, and it includes about 40 acres of adjoining public space. I'm going to turn it over to Karen to highlight some of the key findings from our technical studies and introduce the vision and concepts.
Great, thank you, Beth. So as an important symbol of democracy, the Avenue really belongs to all Americans. It has a long tradition of hosting social, cultural, and political moments and events. It's held us as we've mourned, protested inequalities, witnessed the tug and pull of democracy, and rejoiced in our most important achievements. However, the Avenue's infrastructure is aging and its physical condition declining. The closure of streets around the White House fundamentally changed the Avenue's function. It's no longer a crosstown thoroughfare. The roadway is very wide with few cars and little street level activity. It also doesn't have the characteristics to become a successful retail street. The predominant office use in the area limits evening and weekend activities, which makes it difficult to sustain viable retail and a concentration of active ground floor uses, which we anticipate will be further complicated by the new hybrid workplace culture. Leading up to this work, we completed several studies to inform decision-making, including a pedestrian life, transportation, urban design, and market study. We also wanted to highlight a 2020 ULI report examining how the city could recover from the impacts of the pandemic, which noted the importance of using public space, placemaking, design, and civic infrastructure to revitalize downtown. The transportation study confirmed that the closures of E Street and Pennsylvania Avenue at the White House reduced east-west vehicular traffic and found that about 20 feet of roadway could be allocated to other uses while maintaining an acceptable level of service. It also revealed the Avenue as a heavily used regional transit and bike corridor with up to 80 buses an hour and nearly 2,000 bicycle trips on an average weekday. The Avenue also has areas where deteriorating conditions, perimeter security, and other physical barriers impede pedestrian access. Federal and local agencies agree that the Avenue should be a beautiful street designed for people first, and that its highest and best use is as a venue elevated as America's stage for nationally significant events, a place to celebrate and showcase the best of American art, culture, and entertainment. The Avenue's iconic vista, scale, and symbolic location can't be replicated anywhere in the nation. And by scaling up programming for national attractions here, we can help raise the city's and the region's visibility on the national and international stage. So to do this, we need to right-size the road to match today's needs and free up space for other uses. We've prepared 3 concepts that explore different ways to realign circulation, reconfigure the public space, and offer different options to balance daily use of the street with event programming. So each concept treats the corridor and each of the Avenue's 3 major public spaces a bit differently and propose a range of modest and ambitious ideas for consideration. So we will go on a quick tour of the concepts. These are the 3 guiding themes. Urban Capital proposes a downtown destination. Linear Green proposes a car-free urban linear park. And Civic Stage proposes a large central promenade with Capitol views. So each concept uses that 20 feet of excess roadway I mentioned earlier in a bit of a different way. Urban Capital is very close to the existing condition. It expands the sidewalks, giving a little more room for pedestrians with dedicated lanes for cars, transit, and bikes. Linear Green creates a curbless pedestrian park with transit and bike lanes in the center. And Civic Stage creates a central paved promenade with travel lanes and dedicated bike lanes on each side. So next we'll look at an example of how the concept treats one of the three main public spaces. And I will note that these were put out as high-level ideas and not concrete designs. So we'll start at the western end of the avenue near Freedom Plaza. This is a space that can be relatively isolated and frequently empty due to its elevation. Here, the urban capital concept proposes bringing the plaza to grade and bringing a curbless street that realigns travel and bike lanes diagonally through the public space, essentially creating two new plaza spaces. So over at the center of the avenue, we have Market Square, which is a busy area, but where long distances can make crossing the avenue a challenge. Here, the Civic Stage concept joins the center promenade with a spacious mid-block crossing, creating a new flexible central plaza. And moving along to the eastern end, this is where Pennsylvania Constitution and 4th Street intersect. It's not a very intuitive area to navigate as a pedestrian, and the current configuration creates some long stretches of sidewalk and confusing medians. So with this proposal, Linear Green straightens out the intersection with Constitution and also closes the section of 4th Street to make pedestrian connections along both avenues more cohesive and provide an active park space between the galleries. The concepts also explored how the avenue functions as a venue. We looked at each of these urban rooms, the main public spaces, like this example of a flower festival at the western end. And we also looked at how the entire corridor can combine with the public spaces to essentially create a mile-long venue space that could potentially balance festival activity, event activity, and traffic flow for an event of longer duration. After the commission kicked off the public outreach in March, we spent the next 4 months hosting public meetings. We held over 65 briefings, responded to over 450 questions, comments. We also got out on the avenue during some local events and even did some interviews for local papers and TV. We learned that people are very motivated, inspired, and excited about the future of Penn Ave. The 5 biggest topics we heard and interest in included skateboarding and the future of Freedom Plaza, connecting the avenue with safe cycling infrastructure, integrating green space and sustainable design strategies, creating a vibrant multimodal street that's also a place to gather and celebrate, and balancing event use with traffic impacts, access, and noise. And the eventual design will likely take ideas and inspirations from these concepts and also the public feedback. That concludes our whirlwind tour of the concepts and the public feedback, and I'll pass it back to Beth to talk about what's next.
Thank you, Karen. So we gained considerable insight during our conversations with the public and the stakeholders. And while we know there's going to be many interests to balance and issues to work out, most everyone recognizes the opportunities the avenue presents, the need to improve it, and are receptive and enthusiastic about the new vision. I'm pleased to share that the General Services Administration and the National Capital Planning Commission have actually secured the funding for the next phase of planning to prepare a new Pennsylvania Avenue plan. NCPC, GSA, the Park Service, and the district government are all working closely and collaborating to advance this work. So the new Pennsylvania Avenue plan will consist of 2 primary components. First, a schematic public space plan will address pedestrian access and circulation, as well as the alignment, configuration, and size of the right-of-way and public spaces. And it will also address the infrastructure needs to revitalize the vision. Second, the new plan will also include an implementation program with recommendations on governance, including the administration, operations, and maintenance of the avenue, all important for its use, upkeep, enjoyment, and long-term success. For more than 25 years now, the partners partner agencies have been fulfilling their individual roles without any one entity being in charge, nor has there been an established body to adequately coordinate and make decisions on behalf of the Avenue's greater good, which is very much a shared street between the local district government and the federal government. So the Avenue needs a single steward to advocate for its future and its sustained contribution to the district, the region, and the nation. This diagram illustrates our anticipated timeline to prepare the new plan. We're currently working on the areas highlighted here in yellow. We recently kicked off a site survey, and we're diligently working on the scope of work and the RFP to procure consultant services to advance the planning and design phase, which is highlighted here in blue. In order to implement this plan, legislative changes will be necessary, and we'll start that towards the end of our planning and concept design work. And since this work's going to take a few years, our partners are already beginning to think about how we can use demonstration events that can occur in the near term to start to stimulate the local and regional economy. These events will also inform what infrastructure, public space, and permitting improvements are necessary for its success. So revitalizing Pennsylvania Avenue as a venue will support the district's economic development strategy and contribute to the region's long-term economic viability. Civic investments can drive tourism and economic revitalization, much like we invest in a new waterfront or a convention center. There's no better time than now to leverage the Avenue's assets, reclaim its important role in the district, region, and nation. People will get to enjoy a new public space amenity worthy of its history, a place where we can all celebrate our diversity and culture, to tell our stories, honor our past, and aspire to our collective future. The Avenue can be a beacon for the region and the nation's capital, a place where all Americans can be proud. This concludes our briefing, and we're happy to take any of your questions or initial comments. There we go.
All right. Thank you so much. Very interesting. And, you know, as an outlier region who has to do some of these types of projects, it's not easy to get community input, but you all have some great ideas, and I love it as a place for all. So I'm going to open up for questions to the District of Columbia. Does anyone have, I don't see any hands, but I might be missing them. How about Maryland? Virginia? WMATA or other agencies? Wow, y'all just said, well, no one has any questions. Like I said, very big project. I look forward to hearing more about it in the years to come.
Thank you.
Mayor Newton had a question.
Oh, please go
thanks.
ahead, Mayor Newton. I'm sorry I didn't see your hand.
Thanks, Kelly. I appreciate that. I just want to say, wow, I am so impressed with what you've done. Some of us have been talking about doing something similar in the city of Rockville, and I just think that's going to be terrific. Just kudos to you and all the team who worked on it. So,
oh, thank you. Hopefully we'll have a lot of good lessons learned that we can share.
Thank you, Mayor Newton. I see now that Dave Snyder has his hand up, so I'll call on him.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Madam Chair, and thanks for this presentation. Two quick questions. What are the number of cars that are currently using it, and what are the plans for diverting that traffic to the extent that it can't be diverted by transit and other things in terms of managing that traffic if we're going to remove it from Pennsylvania Avenue? And secondly, what is the process going forward? And Madam Chair, will TPB have an additional opportunity to comment perhaps as things move forward? So two quick questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Snyder. I'm going to see if Karen can pull up some of our data on the transportation piece, but I'm going to answer those in reverse order. Yes, definitely. The Transportation Planning Board will have opportunity. We are in the very early stages. Hopefully we'll have a consultant on board by spring, summer. And then we're going to have a very rigorous process to start planning and design, which will also include outreach. We're also very interested in working closely with some of your committees during this process as well. And I'm going to let Karen take the initial question. And we may not have all the data here, but we're happy to follow up with you as well on some of the exact numbers. Karen?
Yes, very happy to follow up. And as this process moves forward, so we did this transportation study in 2018. With the impacts of COVID, all these studies will have to be refreshed. In 2018, I think we found that the average level of service was a B, C. I would have to double check that. It's in our urban design analysis. Both the transportation study and the urban design analysis are on our project page. But that essentially led to the conclusion that 2 lanes, 20 feet of space could be reallocated without impacting that level of service. In terms of diverting the traffic around, I think there were potentially some modeling scenarios done with the traffic study. But again, we will be updating all of these and hopefully incorporating some future projections on the impact of hybrid work and all that to the avenue. As you may know, the South Side is heavily federal office headquarters. So it's changed a lot since these studies have been done.
Yeah, and I'll just add that as far as kind of the rerouting of traffic and looking at that, the next phase of work, which will include more concept development, taking those 3 ideas and honing them down into a more defined concept. And then we'll be going through a rigorous both NEPA and historic preservation review process, which will analyze all of that in more detail. But essentially, both the urban capitol and the civic stage, when there's not an event happening, there's really we don't anticipate many traffic issues at all. Linear Green does reroute that traffic, which could be a bit more challenging because it's a car-free option, so it would reallocate the local traffic. So I think, that kind of gives you an idea of where we are, but we'll definitely be able to have a lot more specifics, not only in numbers, but the analysis and the impacts of that as we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I will call on Takis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Partially it was answered just in the last couple of phrases. I was about to ask about the merging of these concepts eventually in the concept building phase. We have seen some major capitals doing something similar, like the Montreal did the Quartier des Spectacles as a last decade or so, and what they did there was merging them, so having a very flexible space that was equipped for everything. I think the new thing that you're adding here is the green, with a pretty ambitious concept that completely does the car-free thing, and I would be very excited to see how you build at least parts of that into this. I think that the time is ripe for openly discussing that, but I wanted to ask you whether in the pre-consultation with stakeholders you have gotten more approval or more pushback on one of the 3 concepts. What was the more popular one, and what was the more attached to problems one?
That's a very interesting question. And actually, Jeff, who's with us now, did a lot of that analysis. What's interesting is that linear green was by far, which is the more urban park concept, was by far the concept that most people love the most because of the people love the idea of, many people, I should say, love the idea of transit only, but also the greening of the avenue. However, we did receive quite a bit of pushback on how that would impact traffic downtown. So, it kind of fell into both buckets. The other concept that's kind of rising up is the civic stage. I think there were a number of people, a number of stakeholders that were intrigued by the idea of that central promenade and kind of more of what we typically think of as a more European type boulevard, but it has challenges as well. So these are the kind of things that we'll be looking at as we move forward and how to balance. But we hope to take the best ideas from each of these concepts and, integrate them into that final direction.
Excellent, thank you. That's really exciting. Just to think about that. I would challenge the idea that the civic stage is a European thing. It's actually very international. Actually, the
That's
project that
true.
you have
Yes.
chosen is from all across the world. And I brought Montreal as a very North American example of implementation of something like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Some great questions. And this is, it's going to be hard to put all the ideas into place, but I love the start that you have already done with all the different input and the different ideas. And I do agree, probably merging them in some way is going to probably where things will end up. I look forward to hearing more about this in the future. Before we move on and let these ladies move to their next meeting, are there any other questions from anybody? From any of the jurisdictions. I don't see any hands up at the moment. So, okay. Thank you all
Thank
very
you.
much. It was a great presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you. Okay, so we'll move on to chairman's remarks. I do have a few things I would like to share with you. I'm saddened to inform you that we will be bidding a goodbye to our long-term colleague on this board, Mayor David Meyer from the city of Fairfax. David will be stepping away from the board and, at least for the time being, from elected office starting next year. David, you've been a very effective and thoughtful member of this board, a great mentor. You've not just been representing the city of Fairfax very well, but also bringing in a true regional outlook to the discussions, recognizing that this board looks at all 23 jurisdictions and 3 states as a single entity when planning to improve our transportation system. Thank you for your service. The board has a certificate for you, and I understand this has been mailed to you, and I appreciated your lovely note. I'll read the certificate. It says, the National Capital Region Transportation Planning Board at the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments hereby presents the recognition of gratitude and esteem to David Meyer for his distinguished service to the Transportation Planning Board and the people of the region as Transportation Planning Board member from the city of Fairfax 2014 to 2022. David, would you wish to share any words of wisdom for the board from your long service as an elected official in the region and working on transportation issues?
Well, Chair Sabeski, thank you so much for the recognition. I want to express my appreciation to my colleagues for the opportunity to serve, and also to the absolutely stellar staff that we have at COG and at TPB. I think the board has been well served continuously over the 8 years that I have been involved with them. We all understand that transportation is probably the key that touches everything from economic development and air quality and safety, as well as the ever important issue of fairness and equity in terms of who has access to public transit and how we ensure that everyone has the ability to get to employment, schools, healthcare systems, et cetera. And so transportation is really a key to all of this. And I've learned a tremendous amount from my colleagues, and I do appreciate the opportunity to serve. And I wish everyone the best in this very important board going forward. There's some exciting things in the pipeline, and I know that the board's in good hands with all of you. Thank you very much for the recognition and also for the opportunity to serve.
Thank you, and thank you for those great words. We also will bid a goodbye to Evan Glass from Montgomery County, who will continue to serve on the county council, but will not be returning to the TPB. Thank you, Evan, for your service. I understand staff has mailed your certificate, which reads, the National Capital Region Transportation Planning Board at the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments hereby presents this recognition of gratitude and esteem to Evan Glass for his distinguished service to the TPB and people of the region as Transportation Planning Board member 2019 to 2022. Evan, would you like to share any words of wisdom to the board?
Sure. Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief because, when I joined a few years ago, I knew that the TPB was a technical board with whip smart members on it. And for some reason didn't really get into the limelight, right? You did the work of making sure that people could move throughout the region. And I'm not sure if it was me or what it might have been that increased the board's prominence, especially to my constituents in Montgomery County. And to a lot of other Marylanders as well. But while there might be some policy areas where there is some disagreement within the board and within the region, I think it's far more important that we focus on areas where we all agree. And we know those areas are safe streets, transit equity, transit-oriented development, transitioning to electric vehicles, and a host of other issues. I'm staying on the council and I will be chairing our Transportation and Environment Committee, so I'm not going to go far away. But my new colleague, Marilyn Balcom, is already here at her first meeting and we've passed the baton. But I just want to say thank you to you, Madam Chair, to Lynn, Conti, all the other members. I look forward to continuing our work to improve the National Capital Region. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are great words. And you're right. There's more that we agree on than that is disagreed on. And good conversation really helps us come to some great decision making. And sometimes people don't think transportation is very exciting, but those of us here think it's very exciting.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. I understand that, as you've already brought up, that there's going to be a new member from Montgomery County Council, Marilyn Balcom. Joins us on this board. Welcome. I believe, like you said, that she's here. We're very excited to have you here and look forward to your participation representing Montgomery County. One more change to the board's membership. I will also be saying goodbye to our alternate board member from Prince George's County, Denny Taveras, who will not be returning to the office next year. Lynn, I believe you told me that she is not here. Is that correct?
Correct. She's not on this call today, but she got a certificate too.
Yep, this is the staff did send her a certificate of appreciation. I can read it just so that everyone knows. It says the National Capital Region Transportation Planning Board at the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments hereby presents this recognition of gratitude and esteem to Denny Taveras for her distinguished service to the TPB and people of the region as Transportation Planning Board member alternate, Prince George's County, 2020 to 2022. So, thank her for her service as well. Next, last month we discussed the draft roadway safety targets that we are required to set following federal process. A few of you suggested that the board should share these targets with our legislators and communicate about the state of safety outcomes on our roadways with a call for collective action. After the meeting, a couple of you followed up with the suggestion of sharing the board's sentiments on the matter with the public at large. Since everyone has a role to play, staff worked with me on an op-ed that was published in yesterday's Virginia Mercury newspaper. We suspect other publications may pick this up as well. A copy of the article is posted on today's meeting page. For my last item, I will be concluding my term as chair at the end of this month. It has been my privilege and honor to serve. Will be stepping to other roles, the vice chairs, Reuben Collins and Christina Henderson. I thank you for your trust and confidence that is placed in me last December when you elected me as your chair to this board. Coming from a small jurisdiction in the outer areas of this vast region, I have greatly benefited being a member of this board. This year serving as chair has greatly enhanced my experience and appreciation. Each one of you have been gracious and understanding as I've tried to facilitate the time we have had in our monthly meetings and in the special work sessions discussing several substantive issues around transportation, but in a way things that affect the overall quality of life for the residents of our entire region. Adopting an updated long-range transportation plan that improved on the previous plan and included the addition of climate change as a planning priority was a significant accomplishment. This is not just a vast and diverse region, it is also a vibrant and economically growing region, one of the best in the country. The holistic thinking about transportation and its connections to land use, accessibility not to just jobs, but to all of life's services, ensuring equity and access to transportation services, providing safe and affordable options for travel, and doing so in a fiscally and environmentally sustainable manner. This is what I've seen in the TPB, and bringing it to regional planning. I believe this approach is what is best. I'd like to thank Reuben Collins from Charles County and Christina Henderson from the District of Columbia for all your support and cooperation as we have served as the executive committee, reviewing and advising staff on a whole host of things. It has been a privilege and an honor to serve in this capacity, and I will be returning to the board next year as a member, and I look forward to supporting the new chair and vice chairs. Before we move on, I didn't know if Reuben and Christina, if you would like to say anything to the board as you can conclude your terms as first and second vice chairs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And on behalf of all my colleagues on the board, I recognize and sincerely thank you, Pam Sabisky, for your leadership meeting facilitation during the course of this last year. During your stint as chair, you dealt with very tough issues, transitioning us from virtual to hybrid and in-person meetings. And you also had the challenge of hosting discussions on a variety of important and not easily resolved topics, such as the best mix of long-term transportation projects for our plan to advance a more diverse set of goals, and how best to reduce greenhouse gases within the transportation sector. How do we reverse the trend of increased fatalities on our roadways and to get us to 0 deaths, and so much more? You've done an outstanding job facilitating these discussions in our meetings and several work sessions. You did this with a total commitment to help build consensus and advance actions on some of these very tough regional matters. And I just want to express my appreciation because, as a representative from Charles County, which is one of the more outlying areas that is part of COG, your leadership really set a standard that shows that all of us are a part of this region, and you recognized how important that was during the course of your tenure leading this important body. And so I just want to commend you and your leadership. And coming in, I just also wanted to recognize Mr. Charles Allen, who was the previous chair, because it gave me really a very, very broad perspective on taking on the role as chair. I mean, both of you are outstanding leaders, dealing with tremendous challenges as we move forward. And I just want to show my absolute appreciation for you, Pam, and your leadership. God bless you. God bless you.
Thank you. Such kind words. Ms. Henderson, did you want to say anything?
I did. Sorry, I didn't know. I was trying to. Pam, it's been an honor to serve with you. I sort of thinking back to, I'd say managing a meeting such as this size with this many people in a virtual setting is not easy, but you've made it seem easy in terms of ensuring that we stay on time, but that everyone has an opportunity to feel like they have been heard, especially as we dealt with having to change some of our bylaws and rules, having to make some decisions on some other matters. Not simple task at all, but you've done it with ease and very seamlessly. So I want to thank you for your leadership there. I've definitely learned a lot from you as well. I feel like sometimes maybe in the district we can be a little bit in the bubble. And I think you setting the standard around regional cooperation has truly embodied what COG and the TPB is all about. So thank you so much for your service.
Thank you. All such very kind words. I just want everyone to know that I want to thank everyone for my lovely recognition, and that I couldn't have done any of this without the COG staff. They are truly superior and amazing, and especially I worked closest with obviously Lynn and Conti, always available when I'm asking my many questions. And I'm sure dealing with all of us electeds are not easy, but we really do have such wonderful staff here at COG, and it has truly been an honor and a privilege to represent this board and chair it this year. So thank you all again.
And Pam, I just wanted to quickly interject because, as you know, staff is so astute at preparation, and it asked me to actually read the content of that certificate, and so I will do that at this time. The National Capital Region Transportation Planning Board hereby presents this recognition of gratitude and esteem to the Honorable Pamela Sobeski for her distinguished service to the people of the region as 2022 TPB Chair. Congratulations to you and thank you so much.
Yes, thank you guys again so very much. So many kind words. Okay, so we're gonna and take the first of our 3 action items for today. We will receive a report from the nominating committee. I convened last month to present to us a slate of officers for the TPB's 2023 term. We will be electing the chair and 2 vice chairs. I understand Kelly Russell from the city of Frederick and former chair of this board will present the slate of candidates. Go ahead, Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's been a real pleasure to watch you take on this role, so thanks for the opportunity. I do want to recognize the other members of the board with whom I served on the nominating committee, Charles Allen from the District of Columbia and Jeanette Rochelle from the city of Manassas. It was a real pleasure working with you both. On behalf of the nominating committee, I'm glad to present the following slate of candidates to serve as officers of the TPB during 2020, it says 21, but I'm going to say 23. As chair, Mr. Reuben Collins, president of the Board of Commissioners, Charles County, Maryland. As the first vice chair, Ms. Christina Henderson, council member from the District of Columbia. And as second vice chair, Mr. James Walkinshaw, supervisor on the Board of Supervisors, Fairfax County, Virginia. I move the Transportation Planning Board appoint the nominated members for the post of chair and vice chairs for the TPB for the year 2023.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Newton. Okay, the motion has been made and properly seconded. Before I ask for a vote on the slate of candidates, are there any nominations from the floor for any of the 3 positions? Hearing none. Are there any nays and abstentions from the candidates nominated? Hearing none. Congratulations to Reuben as the incoming chair. You're going to do a great job. And Christina as the first vice chair. And congratulations to James as the second vice chair of the TPB. The board will be in fabulous hands going forward. Lynn, I don't need to take a regular vote for this, I'm assuming?
Yes, just a regular, well, we've done it.
Okay.
Nays and abstentions, right?
Were there any nays and abstentions?
Your slate is approved.
Hearing none, we're going to say that was unanimous, and a round of applause again to our coming in board for January. Y'all are going to be in such great hands. Okay. Lynn, did you need to say anything else? If not, we'll move on. We're good?
Nope. Just congratulations to our incoming officers, and thanks again, Ms. Sobeski, for a job well done. Moving on.
Thank you so much. Okay, so last month we were briefed on the proposed updates to the roadway safety targets and the transit safety targets that we adopted last year. Federal regulations require us to update these targets each year. We will hear from staff if there have been any comments and revisions to the draft targets. Eric Randall will speak about transit targets, and we will also hear from Janie Nam. I will be seeking separate motions to adopt the 2 resolutions as we go forward today. We will start with the transit safety targets. Eric, please get us started.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board, Eric Randall, TPB staff. I will be followed by my colleague Janie Nam to discuss the 2 items and resolutions that staff are offering for your approval this afternoon. These follow on from our meeting last month in November, at which I briefed the regional annual transit safety targets that under federal surface transportation regulations are required to be adopted by providers of public transportation. So this includes Metro and other transit agencies, and then by MPOs on a regional basis. Again, we're supposed to do this annually for transit safety targets. My colleague Janie Nam will speak to the regional roadway or highway safety targets, which are 5-year averages, which are adopted by state departments of transportation and by MPOs. In both cases, the transit and the highway safety targets, we work cooperatively for the transit with the transit agencies, on the highway side with the state DOTs, to take the information that those agencies and state DOTs have developed, put together to assemble regional targets for the Washington metropolitan region. So in your mail out package today, there were 2 memos, which recap respectively for transit safety and highway safety, the briefing we held last month, and the proposed draft targets at that time. And then there are 2 resolutions. And so I'll speak quickly to the first resolution, which is there on your screen, R4-2023. It recaps that, again, this is a federal requirement for MPOs. Recaps the history of transit safety target setting at the TPB. If we can go on to the next page of the resolution, please. And then it covers in the table there the draft targets. Again, for transit safety, we set targets for 4 performance measures across the top in the table there: fatalities, serious injuries, safety events, and reliability performance measure, which is miles between failures, mean distance between failures. And then these are set for modes of operation: heavy rail, which is Metro Rail in this region; streetcar, which is DC streetcar; and then urban bus, which combines the targets established by each of the applicable local bus providers in the region to produce a regional set of targets for the region. Again, for the case of transit safety, no agencies are setting any targets other than 0 for fatalities or rate of fatalities. However, we do anticipate several hundred serious injuries across the region on transit modes. And then you can read the other statistics as well. These were the same targets that were briefed last month. No comments have been received. And accordingly, Madam Chair, I'll be happy to answer any other questions. Otherwise, I'll respectfully offer this resolution for adoption by the board.
Thank you, Eric. So with that, you're making the motion to adopt resolution R4-2023, correct?
We offer it for you to do, Madam.
Okay. I'll put that out there then, asking for a motion. Please state your name and jurisdiction. Then we'll get to questions after I get a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Great. Great, thank you. Are there any questions or comments for Eric? We'll start with the District of Columbia. Maryland? Virginia, other agencies? Okay. Hearing none for the votes, then any nays or abstentions only, starting with the District of Columbia, Maryland, Virginia, or other agencies. Clearly you did a great job, Eric. That's unanimous. And we are going to move along. Resolution R4-2023 is adopted. Next to the roadway safety resolution, R5-2023. Janie, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the board. I'm here today to ask for your approval of Resolution R5-2023 to adopt the 2019 to 2023 highway safety targets for our region. You were briefed last month on the federal rule that requires MPOs and state DOTs to adopt safety targets annually in 5 performance categories and to measure and report on progress towards those targets on a yearly basis. The requirement is intended to help states carry out revisions of the Highway Safety Improvement Program, which requires states to apply a data-driven and strategic approach to improving safety on public roads. Staff reported at the November meeting that compared to the 2017 to 2021 regional safety targets set by the TPB in December 2020, our region met 2 of its 5 performance measures this past year. It fell short of its target for fatalities, the fatality rate, and non-motorist fatalities and serious injuries, but was able to meet its performance targets related to serious injuries and the serious injury rate. Based on the region's safety performance for 2021, staff calculated and presented draft highway safety targets for review and comment. Kim, if you could scroll to the last page of the resolution, please. For the period 2019 to 2023, we recommended that the targets for the number of fatalities and the fatality rate be kept at the same level as last year, but that the targets related to serious injuries, the serious injury rate, and non-motorist fatalities and serious injuries be set at more aggressive levels. No comments have been received on the targets to date, and unless there are any questions, staff recommends that the board approve these targets.
Thanks, Janie. I would like to have a motion to adopt Resolution R5 2023, please. State your name and jurisdiction.
Move to approve the resolution as presented, R5 2023, tax current owns Harlington County.
And a second, please.
Kelly Russell, City of Frederick.
Thank you both. Before we go to the vote, are there any questions or comments for Janie? Let's start with Dave Snyder.
Thanks a lot, Madam Chair. This is one of the most distressing votes we have to take in any given year. None of us are satisfied with these depressing statistics going forward. We've put at the TPB level and in our individual jurisdictions, I know we continue to work hard on this. Frankly, in Virginia, our hands are often tied as to what we can do from a safety standpoint. And I hope that all of us will work really hard to get more flexibility out of Richmond in areas such as speed cameras and red light running cameras, electronic enforcement in general. But going back to the region, I know that we all share deep concern for this. These are not what we want. They're not our goals. They're not our targets, but rather a realistic and a tragically realistic prediction of what we're going to see. So hopefully we can all recommit to addressing the issues of safety in both our transit and especially in our highways, along with our public. Thank you for putting forward that op-ed piece, Madam Chair. But hopefully these issues will continue to be part of our agenda at a very high level next year. So basically concluding, we have an issue here. We're working on it. We need more help. We need more help from the public. And in some cases, we need more help from the legislature. So with that, Madam Chair, those are the comments that I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you. I think many, excuse me, share the same concerns. Let's go with Chris Conklin next.
Yeah, thank you very much. A very similar statement. Obviously disappointed to see no change in the fatality target, but recognize that as a nation and a region, we're not making the progress that we'd like to there. And I am pleased to see that the serious injury component, we are making some progress, and hopefully that will lead to progress in the fatalities. I'd just like to emphasize that as we consider the long-range plan going forward, we may want to have some emphasis on our expectations for the speed of travel on our corridors and the impact of that on the safety performance of those corridors overall. But I'm not proposing any changes to the resolution.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands raised, so I'll go through the normal way of doing this. Is there anyone from the District of Columbia? Maryland? Virginia? WMATA or other agencies? Okay. I recall that at the last meeting, several members supported sending a communication to the region's legislators about the safety outcomes on our roadways and calling for a concerted effort to take actions to address the serious issue. Staff will draft such a letter after our action today. Staff will aim to send this letter next month when I understand we will have the new administration in Maryland, a new class of legislators and a new transportation secretary. But as we all work with our state legislators, I think it's important, as already stated by Mr. Snyder, that we keep this in our legislative priorities. For the votes then, any nays or abstentions? Although this will be counted as yes votes, the District of Columbia, Maryland, Virginia, or other agencies? Okay, that's unanimously approved. The next action item is where we allocate federal grant funds for alternative modes of transportation projects and studies in the District of Columbia. Earlier in the year, we did the same with Maryland and Virginia, I believe. John Swanson will present the recommendations from the selection committee that we will then act on. I will seek a motion to adopt the resolution after John's briefing. John, please go ahead.
Are you muted, John? John, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you see
Okay,
me?
good. Now I can hear you. So start over. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Sorry about that. This is always a pleasure to come before the board and seek your approval of some great projects to improve the opportunity to walk and bike and build great communities and provide access to transportation opportunities throughout the region. This is a program, it's a federal grant program called the Transportation Alternative Set-Aside Program. And as Chair Sebesky mentioned, I've already come twice before you this year talking about this. I'm going to go through the process really quickly because you've already heard it before. But let's just go to the next slide. I'm going to set this up with some good news. Tim, thank you. Yeah, a success story. It's always nice to start sort of, this is what we're looking to do with this program. This is an example of an area. It's in Georgetown, but this is, an example that could be replicated and found in many places, some similar things throughout the region. We have funded the improvements at the CNO trailhead and along the CNO path down there in Georgetown on 2 occasions through this program in 2019 and 2021. And even before that, we funded a study that looked at ped bike enhancements along Water Street in the CNO canal down there in 2016. So we have as folks know, we have this program which funds planning studies called the Transportation Land Use Connections Program. And that program, along with the Regional Roadway Safety Program, which is another very similar program, provide a lot of basis for and provide sort of the preliminary work for capital improvements, which can be funded through TAP. So this is a great way to think about this program and the opportunities it provides. Next slide, Kim. And let's go to the next one. Again, it's a grant program. It's a federal grant program, the Transportation Alternative Set-Aside Program, that goes back to the early 1990s as a real sort of deep legacy. Has done a lot of great work in our region and throughout the country. Our role in this is kind of special. As a large MPO, we are designated suballocated funds, and we're given the responsibility to select projects for those funds. So that's what this is about today. This is the DC process that I'm going to be, and DC projects that I'm going to be talking about. Next slide. This was the schedule for DC. The application period was open for about a month and a half, and we had a selection panel meet in November, and we're seeking approval today so these projects can get going. Next slide. Our process remains the same for all of these, all 3 of our states. We have a selection panel with staff from the 3 DOTs, and we rank the projects, select them, and develop the recommendations by consensus. Next slide. So it really does provide us with a great opportunity to put some money on the priorities that this board has sort of said now for a number of years we really believe in. And I'm not going to go through the whole list, but I will highlight that the projects today are really supporting, in particular, the third from the bottom there, supporting the National Capital Trail Network. This awesome regional trail network that we're promoting completion of, and the projects that you're going to be seeing are taking major steps toward that. Next slide, please. So in DC, DC is now moving toward to a 2-year funding cycle. So what you're going to be approving today are projects for the next 2 years. So we'll be back doing the same thing 2 years from now. The available funding was $2.3 million, and we're recommending a full expending of all those funds. And for the first time in a while, the DC program was competitive this year. So we are actually leaving one project unfunded, and we're actually going to put some extra money toward a project that was needed extra funding that was approved last year. Next slide. Here's a list of projects. I'm going to go through each of them quickly. And next slide, Kim. So the Anacostia River Trail. One of the things that's really outstanding about the work that we're doing is that we have this legacy of trails already in our region, and we're already in a position where some trails need to be rebuilt, and this is a good example of one of them. This is a very important link in the National Capital Trail Network, which I mentioned earlier. It provides connections to underserved communities. It's 3.5 miles east of the Anacostia River, and it needs to be redesigned to current modern standards. So this application is going to be redesigning this 3.5 mile long trail so that it meets ADA standards, so that it's widened and can really be the sort of the key link that we all know it needs to be. So next slide. The Joyce Road Trail and Beach Drive Trail is another very exciting one here. This is a key link in and folks know from in DC and outside of DC that Rock Creek Park is a real sort of gap, and it's hard on a bike or if you're walking even, to get across that. And so on Military Road, we funded a couple years ago a study to look at the feasibility of a trail across the park, and this is the first stage it's an important stage in making that connection. So it's $651,000 for full design for two pieces of that, going from the east side of the park down to Beach Drive, and then rebuilding a section of the trail north of that. So it's a very key link, again, in our National Capital Trail Network. Next slide. Here's a couple projects which I put together. These are two separate projects, but I put them together on one slide. District of Columbia has increasingly invested in the installation of green infrastructure facilities that are meant to replicate natural hydrological processes in places that have large impervious surface areas. So this is typically bioretention facilities, often called rain gardens, but also street trees and landscaping and permeable pavements. So DC has done a great job of this already, been a real sort of model in the nation, but we're going to be funding a system to monitor how effectively these systems are working on a long-term basis, and also piloting some new approaches and potentially revising the district's green infrastructure standards. So it's a different kind of project. In other places in the region with these funds, we often are funding sidewalk improvements and more straightforward things, but DC is already sort of on the cutting edge on a lot of this work, and so we're excited to be funding this one. Next slide. And then finally, we have over the years funded a number of projects to improve Union Station, which is, of course, a national treasure. And this money will be used to restore, repaint, and conserve the historic decorative finishes in the East Hall at Union Station. So next slide. Finally, after deciding that the panel really wanted to fund those projects I've already listed, we had a little under $50,000 left on the table. The remaining grant application, which had some other problems associated with it, was $2.5 million. It was decided that partial funding would be not appropriate for that project, but we didn't want to leave any money on the table. And so we decided it would be good to find if there were projects that were already funded in past rounds that could use some additional funding. And this one actually was readily available. It's a great project that we funded last year. The 11th Street safety improvements, improving bike ped infrastructure in and adjacent to existing facilities, as well as incorporating pedestrian improvements through shortened crossings and improved visibility. And this is on 11th Street at Vermont and S Street, and 11th at Rhode Island and Q. Very practical project already moving forward. And so we're pleased to put some extra money toward the completion of that. So with that, next slide. We are seeking your approval of Resolution R6-2023 to fund these 6 projects. Thank you.
Great. Great information. I'd like a motion to adopt resolution R6 2023, please, stating your name and jurisdiction.
Hi, it's Anna Chamberlain with DDOT, and I would like to put in the motion to approve the DDOT, the DC TAP proposal.
Is there a second for R? I'm sorry?
Second, Earl Lewis with MDOT.
Great, thank you. All right, before we go for the vote, are there any questions? We'll start with the District of Columbia. Maryland. Virginia. Vermont or other agencies? Okay. So for the votes, are the only nays and abstentions, starting with the District of Columbia, Maryland, Virginia, WMATA, and other agencies. So that looks like that's a unanimous vote there. Congratulations.
Can I also just add sorry, I wanted to thank DDOT staff. They're outstanding to work with, as all of our DOT staff are, and Kelsey Bridges in particular. So thanks for, I think, some really great coordination on this. And I just also want to mention that upcoming, there's going to be a new round of funding for the Maryland TAP project. So folks from Maryland might want to start thinking about that. The application period for Maryland TAP is going to open in April. And again, we're always interested in seeing particularly projects that are moving forward on some things that we've studied through the TLC program, but also the Regional Roadway Safety Program. So thank you.
All right, great. Okay, next, the item is our last item and is for our information. As a board, earlier this year, we adopted a resolution adopting aspirational goals to reduce the greenhouse gases within the transportation sector by certain amounts by 2030 and 2050. Importantly, we endorsed a set of strategies that when implemented will help reduce on-road greenhouse gas emissions. Transitioning our large vehicle fleets, government-owned and privately owned, to clean fuel and away from fossil fuel is one of the strategies we endorsed. It is also the greatest potential to reduce greenhouse gases. We also talked about the significant amount of new funding provided by the federal government through the state departments of transportation to develop electric vehicle infrastructure. Today, we begin our engagement in tracking the work activities on this strategy and learning more about the issues we need to address and the opportunities we can take advantage of to implement this strategy. Kicking off this initiative is Earl Lewis, Maryland's Deputy Transportation Secretary and the chair of the Maryland Zero Emission Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Council, ZVIC. He will provide an overview of the current priorities for the council, including planning for the new federal funds allocated to Maryland. Earl, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pam. I appreciate that great introduction. I want to say hello to the members of the Transportation Planning Board, staff, and everyone else who's listening in today. Thanks for giving me time to present on zero emission vehicles and efforts and results in building charging infrastructure as this emerging technology continues to grow and evolve. For those of you who did not know, you'll soon find out that I am passionate about zero emission vehicles, or ZEVs, going back to my days at the University of Virginia in the early 1980s. I'll also say that I drive a hybrid as one of my vehicles, but I'm also on a waiting list, the 2024 Chevy Silverado EV, which I got on in April and won't be available until the end of 2024. So many people who are trying to buy EVs right now have a wait of time because of the demand, which is a good thing that there's a lot of demand for these vehicles. They even go beyond the Chevy Silverado. Going to the next slide. All right, demand for EVs is exponentially growing. And in the coming years, thousands of drivers in DC, Virginia, and Maryland will have an experience of buying them. Many already have. So we need to pick up the pace on building out our EV charging infrastructure to make sure there are enough chargers to meet the growing demand. As many of you know, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, created the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Grant Program, or NEVI, to help meet the demand nationally. To accomplish this momentous task, we'll need collaboration from public and private partners, including utilities and developers. Building out EV chargers for light-duty vehicles like the family car is only one element of this. We'll also have to plan for heavy-duty vehicles and ZEVs like buses, which many in the jurisdiction have already been working on in terms of counties in Northern Virginia, the District of Columbia, and in Maryland. The heavy-duty technology for like Class 8 trucks is probably about a decade behind light-duty vehicles. There's a lot that we can do, especially with light-duty vehicles, which was a big part of our conversation that we had earlier this year. I'll also talk about how Maryland's preparing for the electrification of transportation, has been working on this for over a decade. Next slide. Okay. First, I want to show you the why. Why are DOTs focused on building out our EV charging network and working with a whole lot of other organizations in collaboration? Well, here it is. At the end of November, Maryland crossed the threshold of more than 60,000 registered EVs in the state. As of November 30th, we have 60,294 registered EVs in Maryland. If you take a look at the bar graph, you can see that we've come a long way. Some 609 vehicles registered in 2012, which is just a decade ago. That's actually an increase of 10,000%. As many of you are aware, that increased percentage is sometimes what you want to look at more closely than the total numbers. At the end of FY22, Maryland saw a 50% increase in registered EVs since the end of fiscal year 2021. So the bar at the far right shows our current FY 2023, and we're only 5 months into 2023. You can see that we're already ahead of last year's pace, and that curve will definitely steepen as we get through the next 7 months of the fiscal year here in Maryland. Next slide. Currently, Maryland is seeing the majority of EV registrations in the central region of the state, including Anne Arundel, Baltimore, Frederick, Howard, Montgomery, and Prince George's counties. You can see where most of the EVs in Maryland are registered on this map. The dark red zone zip codes are where there are more than 1,000 EVs registered. Currently, there are 6 zip codes in Maryland with more than 1,000 registered EVs, including 1 zip code in Potomac that has more than 2,000 registered EVs. What is also interesting from this map is that you can see there are EVs registered in the majority of zip codes across the state. So we are seeing EVs touch every single part of Maryland, including in rural areas in Western Maryland and along the Eastern Shore. This tells us that we need to build out our EV charging infrastructure in an equitable way that includes all parts of Maryland, suburban, urban, and rural. As more moderately priced EVs come to market, other areas of the state will be seeing rising EV purchases and registrations, and obviously the need for more EV recharging infrastructure. Next slide. We also broke down the numbers to see what kind of EVs are being driven in Maryland. Currently, 43% of the registered EVs in Maryland are Tesla EVs. That's followed by Toyota with 10% and Chevy with about 8%. We expect the registration of EVs to continue to exponentially grow, thanks in part to the Inflation Reduction Act that will provide a $7,500 EV tax credit for new vehicle models and a tax credit of up to $4,000 for used EV vehicles, which is a big step that'll make EVs available to more moderately income families and households. We're also seeing a change in the vehicle market with more automotive makers committing to offer more electric vehicles in their showrooms. Many automakers have detailed plans to electrify large portions of their fleets over the next decade or market products, with some announcing goals of having fully electrified lineups between 2025 and 2035. I think Volvo is 2025. I believe Chevy's GM and CEO has said they're going to have their entire lineup either ZEV or fuel cell by 2035. Now we're seeing the shift in the marketplace as well from consumers on buying electric vehicles. So how are these EVs going to get powered up, and what happens when an EV driver wants to take a road trip? This is where the vision of NEVI comes to play. Next slide. NEVI is a new program created in the IIJA that provides federal formula funding for states to build out the EV charging infrastructure along designated alternative fuel corridors such as interstates. I can tell you that every state DOT, I think there were 51 of them, was able to submit their NEVI plan. So there's interest in all the states by the DOTs. The mission is to build out a national network of 500,000 chargers by 2030. These are all fast chargers. Requirements include an EV charging station with at least 4 150 kW DC fast chargers every 50 miles along the interstates and within 1 mile of an exit or intersection. These DC fast chargers can charge up most EV passenger vehicles in about 30 minutes to 80% fully charged. In Maryland, we'll get approximately $60 million in formula funding over 5 years to increase alternative fueling stations in the state. For the first year, we'll get about $9.2 million. Because it comes late in the federal fiscal year 2022, we're allocating and spending those dollars in federal fiscal year 2023. For fiscal years 2023 to 26, we'll get $12 million in NEVI funding each year. Nationally, there's also $2.5 billion in discretionary grant funding over a 5-year period, FY22 to FY26. Guidance on these grants was originally due mid-November, but they've been delayed. So hopefully we'll see that in early 2023 in January or February. And we're obviously going to look forward to these additional grant opportunities that will require local jurisdictions and private sector entities to partner with the DOTs in their state to take advantage of these grant opportunities. The two discretionary programs are going to be called the Corridor, a grant program, and a community grant program. And obviously, we're waiting for more details. NEVI also required each state to submit its own plan on how the state would spend the money and roll out the EV charging infrastructure. Next slide. Maryland and MDOT was proud to be one of the first states to submit our NEVI plan for federal government review on July 15th. We also were among the first group of states that received approval on September 14th. Next slide. Maryland NEVI plan has 23 alternative fuel corridors covering more than 1,000 miles along our busiest highways. You can see the graphic here. You can see the alternative fuel corridors crisscross the state and follow the paths of our major interstates and highways or connecting those interstates or highways. Next slide. 3 of these alternative fuel corridors include hydrogen and propane. One challenge we need to address with NEVI funding is a change in the rules for alternative fuel corridors. When the Federal Highway first established the alternative fuel corridor program about 5 years ago, the rule was to have EV chargers within 5 miles of highways along these corridors. The new rule, which makes sense, mandates charging stations to be within 1 mile of an exit or intersection. So what that means is that our earlier designated corridors are still recognized, but instead of being corridor ready, they're now considered corridor pending until we hit that new standard, which means we're hoping that once the funding is spent to get all the corridors corridor ready, we can spend outside the corridors for EV charging station. Because the standard has changed, more of our already designated alternative fuel corridors are only corridor pending. So probably for the first at least 3 years of the program, we'll be spending all the money in Maryland make the corridors corridor ready. But hopefully by the time we get to years 4 and 5, we'll be able to spend some of that formula funding outside the corridors for a lot of our EV recharging needs. Next slide. So MDOT's NEVI plan will expand and add to our already robust electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Currently, we have 1,188 charging stations and 3,398 charging outlets across Maryland. 80% of the outlets are level 2. That means they supply a full charge in 3 to 8 hours. About 20% of the outlets are DC fast chargers that give an 80% charge in about 30 minutes, as I said earlier. Less than 1% of the outlets are level 1 that takes 11 to 20 hours for a full charge. Probably many people in this call who may have been EV pioneers may remember those days a decade ago if they were one of the first to buy an EV, where charging times were a lot longer. So the technology continues to advance, and I believe that's going to be a trend as we move forward also. This map shows the locations and types of charging stations in Maryland. You can see most of the charging stations are in the central part of the state, especially around the I-95 corridor. This is not surprising, as this map closely aligns with the map showing the zip codes where you see the most registered EVs. I-95 also serves as a major thoroughfare through Maryland, with many vehicles passing through the state on their journey, either north or south. MDOT is currently setting up our NEVI program. We released a request for information on September 27th that had 35 questions that we wanted to get feedback and recommendations on from the private sector, other government entities and NGOs on the development of electric vehicle charging networks throughout the state. We actually got those responses by October 26th, and we actually received 29 responses from a subset of organizations, including one Maryland county. Looking ahead, we are working with our federal partners to establish parameters of the NEVI funding program and the type of funding announcement We expect to know more about, again, those discretionary programs in early 2023. Next slide. Okay, NEVI is just one of many avenues to build EV recharging infrastructure in terms of funding support. 2 years ago, the Maryland Public Service Commission approved a 5-year EV supply equipment pilot program to install more than 900 public charging stations on government property throughout Maryland. The program also provided subsidies for at-home charging equipment. That program runs through 2023, I think going into 2024. We've also worked with the private sector and utilities. There are now 14 EV chargers at BWI Thurgood Marshall Airport, including several from a partnership with BG&E and Lyft. And just last month, the Maryland State Highway Administration announced a partnership with local utility companies to install electric vehicle charging stations at several state park and ride locations. The first site at the Myersville Park and Ride facility off I-70 in Frederick County is already up and running with 3 fast chargers. It also has an electric storage unit that we're going to learn a lot about how we can use that to help reduce demand charges and also support grid applications while still making sure that EV recharging is available to all those who want to use that station. While we are partnering to add EV chargers on MDOT property, the majority of EV chargers will be built by the private sector, given that it's overwhelmingly a private sector business. Next slide. Currently, the 3 largest network providers in Maryland are ChargePoint, Shell Recharge, and SemaConnect. Together, the companies are responsible for about 64% of all available charging stations in Maryland. Breaking the numbers down even further, go to the next slide. Maryland has 208 public DC fast chargers. Shell Recharge and ChargePoint are responsible for about 44% of all available DC fast stations in Maryland. Those non-network stations are primarily for fleet use. Okay, next slide. As we tackle the challenges to building out the EV charging infrastructure, we also have to be cognizant to ensure equal access to EV charging throughout the state, including urban and rural areas that have equity concerns. It's also important that we include diversity, equity, and socioeconomic considerations to make sure all Marylanders have access to this emerging technology. I believe most EV charging drives will power up while at home. This will be easy for those in single-family homes, but much harder for many of those EV owners who would live in apartment buildings, row houses, or townhome communities. How will we be able to install EV chargers in an equitable way in these areas? As part of our development, we're using the Maryland Environmental Justice Screening Tool, the CDC Social Vulnerability Index, and other resources to help us identify areas of need. I can tell you that in my almost 7 years as chair of ZVIC, I've had the chance to talk with local elected leaders, Maryland Public Service Commission leaders, and there's a concerted effort to not have, with EV recharging infrastructure, have what happened with wireless and broadband, that we need to think real hard and make sure we provide the resource and leadership from the government to make sure EV recharging is accessible across the state for many different types of housing, or in many different communities if it can't be located, next to your home, which will be the case in some situations. I'd also say that there's a lot of emphasis on this in terms of outreach also. So we're addressing issues up front rather than as an afterthought. That can't happen this time. Next slide. So fortunately, we've been taking a broad and diverse approach for more than a decade. Just so you're aware, 11 years ago, Maryland showed great vision by launching the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Council. That was voted on and created by the legislature and supported by the governor. It later became the ZVIC when we added all zero-emission vehicles, including hydrogen fuel cell powered vehicles. Again, I've been chair for the past 7 years and have had the honor of working with many representatives from many of our partner agencies, which includes several state of Maryland agencies, local and state elected officials, including representatives from MACO and MML, utility companies, university representatives, vehicle manufacturers, EV recharging companies, and non-governmental organizations, and many others. A typical ZVIC meeting, and we meet every 2 months, has 65 to 70 folks attending. Before the pandemic, it was probably around 50 to 55, but going virtual actually definitely helped increase those that were able to be a part of those meetings every other month. We've taken many important steps together to lay a foundation for Maryland's EV future. We've conducted community outreach and incentivized EV use through tax credits and rebates. We've set up booths talking about EV technology and recharging infrastructure and the vehicles that are available at the time at community events like state fairs, and also dedicated EV events, which I've had the opportunity to be at several of those over the years. We've used the power of public-private partnerships to build charging stations across Maryland, and we've encouraged state and local agencies to move their own fleets toward EV conversion milestones. Of course, the Maryland state government has to lead by example. Currently, 25% of passenger vehicles purchased for the state government fleet must be zero-emission vehicles. It's got to be 100% by 2028. MDOT MTA is using funding from the IIJA to aggressively transition towards a zero-emission bus fleet. We'll convert 50% of our transit fleet in the Baltimore metropolitan area to ZEV by 2030. That's about 350 buses out of the 700 bus fleet. MDOT MTA is investing more than $436 million for a zero-emission program, bus pilot, and bus procurements. MDOT MTA also announced this program to buy 7 zero-emission battery electric 40-foot and 60-foot articulated buses that should arrive within the next year or so as a vanguard for that fleet. Funding sources include $3.6 million from the Volkswagen settlement related to Clean Air Act violations. In March, MDOT Maryland Aviation Administration got a $6.8 million contract approved by the Board of Public Works for 8 new battery electric zero-emission shuttle buses for BWI Marshall, and we're also using some funds from the Volkswagen settlement. And Federal Highways awarded 3 low or no emission project selections or NOLO grants to Maryland not that long ago, earlier this fall. Prince George's County was awarded $25 million for battery electric buses and chargers and microgrid construction. That's on top of the initiative that Prince George's County had started earlier. Montgomery County's Department of Transportation was awarded, I think it was $14.9 million to purchase hydrogen fuel cell buses and associated infrastructure. And MDOT MTA was awarded nearly $2 million for hybrid bus replacements in Anne Arundel County. Next slide. I've added a slide. No, keep going. Okay, I added a slide that I think should be of interest to everyone. The Inflation Reduction Act also offers several tax incentives to build out EV charging and solar infrastructure that people should be aware of. It's actually pretty significant. Typically, government doesn't pay taxes, so we can't take advantage of tax incentives. But the IRA actually gives government the opportunity to actually get funding to help fund EV recharging infrastructure, EV vehicles, as well as renewable energy technologies. As an example, if you had like a $10 million project, you could add up all the various tax incentives and it could pay for up to $7 million of that project. What's interesting also is that these tax incentives are available, from what my knowledge, primarily to put EV recharging infrastructure and vehicles in communities that I would think would be more defined as Justice 40. So actually, the federal government is really taking initiative to stand behind what they've been stating are their goals to make sure that we don't leave any community behind, and that they're providing additional incentives to make sure we're able to focus on that. So a lot of organizations are looking at this really closely. The one thing also I'd say about NEVI that not everybody knows is that the federal government, typically with grant programs, require that the government own the asset that's paid for. The local government has to own the asset that's paid for by the grant. In this case, NEVI requires a minimum of a 20% match, but the asset that's built from the grant, the EV recharging stations, can be owned by the private sector. So that also gives incentive for the private sector to really respond to this program to build out EV recharging along alternative fuel corridors. And in other locations, we get toward the year 4 and 5, and hopefully there'll be a follow-on similar to the Homeland Security grants I worked on for a long time when I was at MTA. There'll be a follow-on grant program that'll continue this beyond the first 5 years. Okay, next slide. Again, obviously, we're not alone in building out EV recharging infrastructure in Maryland in terms of MDOT. We're part of a group of organizations and states that are working together. What members of TPB might not know is DC, Maryland, and Virginia are involved in several of these groups, as we speak. The Mid-Atlantic Electrification Partnership with DC, West Virginia, and Virginia, the Multi-State ZEV Action Plan with California, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York, Oregon, Rhode Island, and Vermont. That was one of the original plans that was first established back in 2007. Then there's a Multi-State ZEV Task Force that has 17 states in Washington, D.C. that create a memorandum of understanding, support deployment of medium and heavy-duty ZEVs, and the Mid-Atlantic Electric School Bus Experience Project, or MEEP, with Pennsylvania, Virginia, New Jersey, and Washington, D.C. to help school districts learn about electric bus performance. There's also the Transportation and Climate Initiative, the Georgetown Climate Center, Georgetown Law School has supported for a number of years. We're involved in the EV group there, and we've had representatives from DC and Virginia join us. And usually that's from the DOTs as well as from the state's environmental agencies. This diversity of ideas across ZVIC and across states gives a tremendous perspective of the opportunities that are available, and obviously the challenges also. I think we're going to see the EV market continue to expand rapidly. It's also critical to our NIFI planning efforts. One of the things I like to let people know that I've learned over the years is that a internal combustion engine vehicle has about 2,000 moving parts, where a typical EV has about 20. That tells you a lot of what you need to know as to why the global automakers are moving that direction. And obviously there's tremendous, in our region especially, tremendous environmental benefits to moving in this direction as aggressively as possible. So looking ahead, Maryland has ambitious goals of reaching 300,000 EVs by 2025. That might seem like a stretch, maybe it is, but we're going to do everything we can to see if we can get there and continue the momentum that we've seen in the last few years. The state's already proven to be a great idea factory for EV innovation, infrastructure, and policy. We're considered one of the national leaders in EV preparation implementation, as well as other jurisdictions in the region. Now we're obviously challenged to go even further. The TPB goal of 50% light-duty vehicle sales in the NCR region by 2030 is actually less aggressive than Maryland's goal, which is 75%, as recommended by the Maryland Commission on Climate Change to the legislature and the governor within the last few days. And I've actually had the opportunity to represent the Secretary of Transportation on the Maryland Commission on Climate Change for many years. And I think that is a good recommendation to help us reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The path we forged over the last 11 years is allowing us to hit the ground running. I know other jurisdictions in the region are also doing the same thing. We got to be aggressive with these goals, and we'll come closer to reaching them or reach them by being aggressive. I think we can be a leader for the country in how to do this in an effective and collaborative way, which is constructive and helps us meet more than one goal at the same time. So at this point, I'll be happy to take any questions or have any discussion. I know we got about 10 minutes left.
Right. So much information. I will start with the hands that I see up. Let's start with Maddie Berzuto.
Got it. Good. I'm from the city of Bowie. Hi, Earl. I have a question. I heard you speak about microgrids. Has the conversation in ZEVI come up about resiliency? Because we're talking about everything being electrified, and what happens?
Yes, I mean, obviously resiliency is a key tenet of a lot of what we do. Resiliency, adaptation. Actually, about 18 months ago, I played a leadership role in setting up an Office of Climate Change, Resiliency and Adaptation here at MDOT TSO. So we put, as a former Treasury Secretary said, if people really believe in something, they'll put human resources there to help facilitate that. And we've done that at MDOT over the last couple of years by creating that office. So we have a focus on that and how it will help us be resilient as a state. I mean, we actually had a conference call just this morning with an entity that's looking at how you use recycled asphalt to reduce emissions. There's a lot of different ideas out there that we have to focus on, using as many of them as possible so we can get as close as possible to meeting our greenhouse gas reduction goals over the years to come. And saying that, our region has actually been a leader nationally at reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. But as we all know, what have we done for me lately? What have you done for me lately is applies to this. And we have to be just as aggressive, if not more aggressive, as we move forward.
Okay, there are several questions. Patrick Wilhan was next.
Yes. Hello. Hi. Thanks, Earl, for the information. This is great. Really good work that you're doing. Critically, local governments are going to play an important role in this work, and I think in terms of citing the charging stations, in terms of dealing with appropriate locations and zoning and all those issues. What is the committee's plan on engaging with local governments, or MDOT's plan in engaging with local governments moving forward with this?
Well, obviously, we need to make local governments know what the rules of the sub grants are going to be. Right now we're still waiting for additional guidance because it's taken Federal Highway and the DOE Joint Office a little bit longer than they anticipated in pulling all this together. As you know, IIJA and IRA together are really huge undertakings. So I look at this as it may take longer than we would like it to take, but it'll be greater and be more impactful than anybody can really anticipate. So one of the things that we're waiting for is how can we procure this? Can we have to use an RFP, or can we use a notice of proposed grant funding opportunity? That may impact the timing. Obviously, the feds hold the key in this because we have to do what they say. One of the things that will be a challenge for private sector entities is that, as many of you here have been involved with federal grants, the federal government's terms and conditions are their terms and conditions. They're not negotiable. So if you want the funding, you have to agree to the Fed's rules. Obviously, we're used to that. And obviously, we'll have to find partners who are willing to move ahead with that as aggressively as possible. So, originally we were hoping, December, January, we could get the first round out. We're looking at maybe a smaller first round so we can learn from that, with potentially maybe a subset of the corridors, and then having a second round later in 2023. We'd have more dollars available, and we'd obviously be able to tweak the program based on the first round. As you know, with federal grants, it may be 5 years, but each grant year is actually administered a little bit differently. And sometimes the rules can change also. So we want to get this first round out as quickly as possible. But in Maryland, and again, other DOTs are using different formulas. Some of them are like taking all the money and outsourcing it all. Here in Maryland, we sort of take an attack that we want government to be involved so we can make sure that all of our government goals related to the distribution and Justice 40 are maintained as we move forward, and if there are any issues that come up there, that we can talk them through early on, so we can get partners that are willing to help us not just meet their goals as a private sector entity, but what the state's goals are to have an availability of recharging spread in all communities in Maryland, both very urban and very rural, as well as suburban, which is typically where a lot of the vehicles owners are right now.
Dan Imran?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Earl, for your leadership on this. I've learned a lot today. I'm glad I can kind of frame this as a follow-up to Patrick's question. As you're thinking about locations, I'm wondering if you've been thinking about the potential to integrate charging within curbside parking, particularly in dense urban areas. It's something that we've piloted in the district from a couple of different angles. Frankly, there have been a lot of challenges. I'm not sure that that's where I would put all my money, but I'm curious to hear if that's something that's come up in Maryland conversations, and if you've come to any at least initial conclusions around the viability of that.
It definitely has, and obviously one of the challenges is that it costs more to put in EV recharging in some locales than others. I do know from what I hear when I talk to some of the EV firms that install the recharging infrastructure, that they've been having issues with delays of permits, because obviously local government plays a key role in being able to build an EV recharging station or even one outlet. So I think we're gonna have to look at our codes, not just for curbside type recharging, but also for MUD or multi-unit dwelling type recharging. And we're gonna have to be creative. And we're looking for people with creative ideas. That's why I think it's great when you have one of these grant programs where you can go out to the world and you have a lot of different entities that are involved. And I mean, I can't talk about them publicly right now, but we got a lot of feedback with different perspectives from those 29 RFI responses that we got that run the gamut. So we're going to use that to help us structure our grant program so that we can, let's say, motivate people to be creative. Now, this is not something we're going to snap our fingers and it's going to happen. It's a journey like all the other technological transformations that we've gone through in this country over the centuries. But just like we've done with those transformations, I'm confident that we'll get this done with a lot of hard work, a lot of learning from each other, a lot of various entities that are NGOs keeping us honest and making sure we're doing what we're saying we're going to do. That's a challenge that I think we're up to, and we have to be up to get this done right.
So great presentation, lots of great information. Takis, I know you had a question. If you put that in the chat, I'm sure that Mr. Lewis can get back to you on that. Is that okay?
It is absolutely okay. I was about to ask about hydrogen because you have some yellow dots there. They are very interesting to me, but we will have more opportunity to discuss that.
Yeah,
Dineric posted a link to our.
There's actually a big Mid-Atlantic, a big DOE hydrogen initiative going on right now, and there was an entity here in the DMV that actually got the letter of interest in early November when it was due. So now I think we're waiting on December. DOE is going to get back to entities where they have a shot at getting some pretty large money to build a hydrogen hub and hydrogen refueling station. So we're in a mix, and that's one of the advantages of ZVIC. We really have a really good handle on a lot of what's going on in the region related to ZEVs, which is the mission that has been given to us by the legislature.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. What an excellent way to conclude. Thank you, Sebesky, Chair Sebesky. Double thank you, not only for this meeting, but for the entire 2022. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. With that, in respect for people's time, especially since it's the holidays, we'll conclude our business today and for the year. The next meeting of this board will be an in-person meeting. It's scheduled in person right now for January the 18th. And I hope everyone has a great holiday. Best wishes. Happy New Year. Be safe. And thank you again, everyone. Great opportunity. Again, I'm very humbled and appreciative for all the support. And I've enjoyed being your chair this past year. And I look forward to seeing everyone healthy and happy in 2023.
Yep. And Lynn, you will make sure I get all the questions and comments that are in the chat. So.
Yep. But there really isn't. The only thing I put in there was that CPC is hosting an EV meeting, a special EV meeting during their public policy day at the Washington Auto Show, and how to register for that meeting. But I believe all of you should have gotten an email about that already.
Yep.
So it's just a reminder. Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks.
And that group is called Connected DMV for those interested in the hydrogen infrastructure initiative.
Okay.
All right.
And Kelly Russell did not seem to be able to access the op-ed. Lynn, if you'll get that, email that to her.
It's item 6 on the web page. So I can email her directly. But yeah. So if you look at the meeting page, I posted it as item 6.
Yeah, I saw that.
So,
okay. Yeah. Thanks everybody. Happy New Year. Take care.
Happy holidays. Merry Christmas,
Thank you.
everybody.
Happy holidays.
Bye-bye.
Whoop, whoop. Good job, Kim.
Yep.
Good job, Leo. Thanks you, Earl.
Lynn. Bye-bye.
Bye. Happy holidays.
You too.
Thanks, Lynn. Did you need me for anything else, or we're good?
No, you're done. You're done for today. Thank you so much.